Hello. Welcome to the Staying in My Lane podcast. This episode is going to be for the moms and the dads, particularly the moms because I am a mom. I have 3 children. And what does parenting a child with trauma look like? How can we better understand the trauma and the impact that it has on our children's development? I want to talk about autism, ADHD, parenting a child who has behavior needs, whether it's severe or mild. This can be a really lonely road to walk and travel alone because being a mom who has children who have experienced trauma and have some behavior problems as far as that emotional regulation, which I do feel is pretty common for most children. But how does that look for us? How does that feel for us? What can we do to better understand and show up for our child? Because, it's draining and it can be really hard to prioritize our mental health and our self-care needs while parenting, while being a healthy parent for the child that we have. Okay, so the first thing, understanding trauma and the impact that it has. Trauma is a deeply distressing experience that can have a lot of lasting psychological impacts and emotional effects on anyone, but especially children because their brains are not fully developed yet. And it's important to understand that unique perspective on the challenges and the needs of children who have experienced trauma and provide them with that security and that appropriate support so that they can thrive and they can grow and they can develop healthy coping skills in order to be successful adults. Let's first talk about the challenges faced by parents. And I can really resonate and relate to this because, it can be hard. It can be emotionally draining and you may feel really overstimulated a lot of the time and not know how to manage that. So some of the common challenges include understanding your child's behavior and how trauma can, alter a child's perception of the world. This is hard to accept. This can lead to behavioral changes such as anxiety, increased aggression, withdrawal, and just that up and down roller coaster of emotions, right? Managing the child's emotions. So, children who've experienced trauma have difficulty regulating their emotions and not even necessarily regulating. They feel like that's the most common thing to focus on, but identifying their emotions. Children may not even know why they feel the way they do, or they might not be able to identify what emotion they're feeling. So this can lead to outbursts of anger or fear or sadness or even that resentment. They might not be ready for the help. They might not feel in a place where they want to have help. So, coping with their own trauma, parents who've experienced trauma themselves, we may struggle to support our children because we are also expected to manage our emotional issues and our emotional needs. And that's not always easy. So really trying to understand where our child is coming from. And that kind of goes back to that thought process of how did we feel as a child? How did that make us feel as a child? And it might not even be the same situation or feeling, but when we were children, we didn't understand what we do now. So how can we kind of navigate that and be who we needed as a child? Dealing with these emotions can be extremely hard to find a way to navigate that while not letting it overrun your life. It's not easy to deal with flashbacks and nightmares or triggers, and trauma can cause those flashbacks and nightmares. And trauma can cause triggers where you don't even know what the trigger is. You have to kind of find it, which can be really distressing for both the child and the parent, especially, and I can really relate to this. Every time the school calls, my heart sinks because I've had to deal with a lot of behavior with, a child that I have. And it's always like your stomach just drops because you don't know how to fix it and you want to fix it. Us as moms and dads, we want to take away and fix our child's pain. And so being able to create that safe and supportive environment and, ensure that our child feels safe and loved in their home, really try to provide that consistency, that routine. And, for one of my children, knowing what's coming and knowing what to expect is huge. So have that ready to go. If you have a child who needs to know a step-by-step expectation for that day, make a schedule, have a visual in your home to help your child know what's coming so that they don't get nervous or they don't get anxious and have, an aggressive outburst or have a panic attack. So it's really important to listen and validate their feelings and their emotions and allowing their truth to be heard. Allowing the child to express their emotions and really validating those emotions helps a child to feel that safety and security and feel that consistency, and they will be able to trust you more. And that will build your relationship. That will set that foundation for a healthy parent-child relationship in which they would feel safe to seek that safety within you. Another part of this is promoting that self-regulation, that emotional regulation. Teach that child that you have coping skills and coping mechanisms for managing those emotions when they come up, such as deep breathing exercises and mindfulness or journaling. I love art therapy. That's something I've used for my own children. And, I encourage them when they're upset or angry to do a crossword puzzle or draw or paint to try to get that movement in their body, get that movement in their hand, and really get their feelings out on paper, because it's not always easy to say, hey, I'm really pissed off right now because I'm having a flashback of something that happened to me, or hey, I need this from you. One of the things I've learned as a social worker is we often think behavior is bad, and it's not. Communication is behavior, and behavior is communication. When you look at a child with autism and they're pushing or they're shoving and they're throwing things or they're hitting you or slapping you, yes, we need to try to correct that, but that is behavior. That is communication. They're using that behavior to communicate with you and tell you something, whether that's that they need space or they need a drink of water or they're tired or they're hungry. That is communication. And we have to learn with each child individually what those cues are. If you have a child who likes to escape, for example, and runs, maybe they need more movement in their everyday life. Maybe they are telling you that they don't feel safe in that moment. So having those expectations in your home, having that consistent schedule will really allow your child, whether they have trauma or a mental health condition or they have some type of diagnosis, that will help your child know what to expect, create those consistent schedules and routine, which becomes easier with time. They say it takes 21 days to make a change, and that's something I've dealt with my own family. If we want to break bad habits or we want to parent differently, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And, with me, computer time, screen time on the TV, and YouTube being the big thing right now, how do we set those expectations for how much time our children are getting on a screen without that big blow up or explosion afterwards because they want more time? So one thing that's worked for me in my home is setting a timer. I ordered timers off Amazon, and I just have a timer and I say, this is how much you get. You can choose how to divide up your time. And that really gives the child the power to, if they get an hour of screen time, they can break it up into 20-minute increments. Or if they want to use it all at once, that gives them that power to do so. But it also teaches them the expectation and really sets that, okay, this is what I made the choice for. And it gives them that ownership. It can be hard to set these expectations and follow through. We are only human, and we are going to, if we're tired, we might give our children about 30 more minutes on the computer. I am guilty of that. But being able to really be consistent in your routine and be consistent as a parent, and that really creates that expectation for the child. Some additional tips that I find helpful are to avoid physical punishment. And I know not everybody agrees with that, but physical punishment can worsen a child who has trauma or behavior or mental health issues. And it can make it more difficult for them to heal because they may always be in that fight or flight stage. And this can make it hard to focus on building that trust in the relationship. So establish a trusting relationship with a child by being that consistent, reliable, and respectful person is really something that's going to make it easier for that relationship to grow. Encouraging open communication. This is something I talk a lot about in many of my episodes. But creating the open dialogue and the honest environment where the child feels comfortable about talking about their experiences. We don't always feel comfortable talking. So just remembering to be patient, be understanding, and just accept who your child is for who they are in that moment. We cannot force our child to deal with trauma, which has been really hard for me to accept because I want my children to be successful, but I want them to be successful in the time I want them to, which has forced me to stop and take a breath and just do what I can in the moment as a mom to support them. I can't take away their experiences that they've had. I can't change their behavior when they're outside of my care. I can't do those things and to have that control. So really accepting your child for who they are and doing everything you can as a mom or as a parent to support them and just be in the moment. Sit with them, sit with their feelings, and just hear them without yelling, without creating a explosion that might happen, because we all know with children with trauma really do have a hard time accepting that, whether it's burying their emotions or shutting down and withdrawing or acting aggressively and yelling. Those are all ways that children are dealing with their trauma. And so we just have to be really open with that. And one of the big things is to stop judging, whether it's judging the child's behavior and saying, well, that kid is horrible, or, oh, that kid, I cannot wait for him to leave, or judging a parent. We don't know what goes on behind closed doors. Once those kids are out of the classroom, or once the children are out of the daycare, or once a child is out of our sight, we don't know what they deal with. And we don't know if they've been shown or given those coping skills or regulation strategies to be able to understand what's going on in their life. So just being really understanding and stopping that judgment before you feel it coming. As we transition into the next topic, I've spoken with some parents who have kids with autism, and they've discussed with me some of the parenting difficulties with that. So for anyone who doesn't understand, autism is a neurodevelopmental condition that affects communication, repetitive behaviors, and social interaction. And parenting a child with autism requires a lot of understanding their unique needs, their unique way of communicating, and providing those appropriate supports in place and guidance for them to be successful. A lot of the challenges and considerations when talking about autism is communication difficulties. Autistic children may have challenges with those verbal and nonverbal communication patterns, which makes it difficult to understand their needs all the time or express themselves effectively. The next challenge is social interaction. Children with autism may not always interact with children who are their peers or other ages, and this makes it challenging to build relationships and engage in those social activities. So really being understanding of a parent who has a child with autism, if you're on a play date with them and your child is trying to play, just understand that that child with autism may not be ignoring them or pushing them or hitting them intentionally. That may be their way of communication or not understanding how to communicate like the rest of their peers do. I've had the privilege to work with a lot of children who have autism in different settings of my career, and I think that they are some of the most amazing little humans that I've ever met. Their challenge can be sensory overload, sensory seeking behaviors, and repetitive behaviors. They may exhibit repetitive movements or routines and may have a heightened or diminished sensitivity to smell, sensory, touch, feel, and understanding that and not getting offended or upset when this happens, right? It's easy to get overstimulated as adults when we don't know how to deal with an experience or a situation. And so really being able to get to know what works for each individual child is so important. And it's so important to give grace to our friends who have children who have autism, because they are struggling and they may feel a lot of guilt or a lot of sadness because they may feel lonely. They may feel like they don't have somebody to talk to. So being that support for also a parent of someone with autism is so important. Emotional regulation. I think it's so easy as a society when we're in the mall or when we're in a restaurant to judge parents who have screaming children or children who are throwing their food or children who are crying. And you have to understand that children who have autism may experience difficulties with emotional regulation and leading to tantrums, meltdowns, or anxiety. And those, we can't just look at a child and diagnose them on the spot. So it's really important to give that grace and give that understanding to other parents who are in public and are struggling with their children, because chances are they're embarrassed and they feel like a shitty person and they don't need your judgment. So really just don't do it. Don't judge anybody. That's just a life rule, to be honest. Strategies for effective parenting, building that strong support system, seeking that support from your family, your friends, professionals, support groups. There are so many support groups anymore. So that can help you really gain that knowledge and share your experiences and find that support system that you feel you need to cope with those challenges. And we've talked about understanding your child's individual needs. No one child, no matter if they have a mental health issue, no matter if they have a diagnosis, no matter if they're just struggling, understanding your child's individual needs. No child is the same. The first thing that really helps me, and I love to also use this professionally, is to focus on the strengths and the positives. Does your child do something well? What do they excel in? And this should be so easy. This should be something that's easy. We are such a society that focuses on the negatives or the weaknesses in individual needs, and it's really important to find the positive and look at the strengths that a child or a person has. And when you're looking at those weaknesses, keep that strength or that positive in mind and really look at how can this child grow? What can we do to support and help build that strength in those weaknesses, and tailor your parenting style accordingly, and just really try to use that positive reinforcement, use that positive outlook to reward those appropriate behaviors, reward the efforts that your child is making, and encourage them to keep going. It's so easy for us to just say, oh, they've only done this twice, or oh my gosh, it's only day 3 and look at their behavior. A child is going to take time. It's probably going to get worse before it gets better. I've said that before and I'll say it again. It never is going to just magically get better. You have to use those coping skills and those strategies to take that time and really support your child, support yourself. You can also promote communication by using those visual aids, those gestures, those cues, and the simple language to facilitate that communication and understanding with your child. My favorite part of this conversation is probably going to be this. Embrace your child's uniqueness. Embrace who they are. Celebrate those strengths. Celebrate those interests, and really take a look at who your child is individually. If your child is obsessed with a certain farm animal or, a piece of Play-Doh or whatever it may be, celebrate that. Take them to a petting zoo or, buy some more Play-Doh and build with them, get down on their level and just be there. Be there in the moment. We can be so distracted by our phones and social media or watching our favorite Netflix series that we sometimes miss out on the little things, and we're going to miss that when they grow up, right? I mean, that is a conversation for another day, but just really enjoy that in the moment. We take so much of our time and our lives for granted that it's important to be patient and understanding and avoid that frustration, focusing on a supportive and loving environment for your child and focusing on how to help them in a positive and emotionally regulated way. Advocate for your child. Ensure that they receive the necessary services or accommodations, resources in school or their community, healthcare, and just really be that voice for your child. Your child isn't going to know that they need an IEP. Your child is going to need you to be that strength for them. And this also includes staying informed and keeping up to date on that research, the advancements, and the best practices related to what you're going through with your child or with yourself, even. And, looking at health and wellness, looking at holistic ways and methods, looking at that somatic work, looking at different ways to find what works for you, find what works for your child, and just be patient and enjoy the moment, because this moment someday is going to be a memory. And although, moms, we really get overstimulated and we just want 5 seconds to ourselves in the bathroom so we can pee alone. Just really enjoying what is happening in the moment. What about ADHD? Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder is a neurodevelopment disorder that can affect children and adults too. Parents of children with ADHD can face a lot of similar challenges and require those specific strategies to provide the effective support. Some of these challenges are difficulty with attention and organization. Children who have ADHD may struggle to focus. They may struggle to follow instructions or expectations in the school setting. They may struggle in completing tasks, which can lead to challenges with homework and everyday chores and routines. And one thing I've noticed worth working with a lot of children who have ADHD is they have impulsive behaviors, and that impulsivity is really big with ADHD, such as interrupting, blurting out answers, engaging in risky activities, and they may not think before they do something, which, leads into that emotional dysregulation. Children with ADHD may experience really intense emotions that can be difficult to manage, leading to tantrums and meltdowns, emotional explosions, or withdrawing themselves from the people that they're around. This can lead into academic and social difficulties. ADHD can really impact a child's academic performance and their social interactions with peers, as they may struggle to keep up with schoolwork or make friends effectively, be appropriate in social settings as far as knowing when to stop talking or kind of reading the room. So, effective parenting strategies for children with ADHD really include creating that structure and predictable environment that I've talked about before, establishing those clear routines, those clear boundaries, using visual cues, and providing those consistent rules and expectations. Again, we talk about positive reinforcement, focusing on praising and rewarding those desired behaviors. This does not mean that you're giving in to their behavior or kind of bowing down to them. This just helps reward those desired behaviors rather than punishing them for the negative ones. Children feed off positive feedback. So the more that we, and I think I've mentioned this before, the more that we give reactions to children, the more that we feed into that function of behavior, the more they're going to react back to us. So when we look at things like screaming or reacting to them doing something small, that's going to feed into that function of behavior, such as attention-seeking behavior. So really trying to not react to the little things and trying to just take that breath, to step back and think before we say something. And, because when we react into those little things, those things are going to turn into big things. And provide those clear and concise instructions. Give a short, simple instruction that's easy for the child to understand, that's easy for them to process, because a lot of that, cognitive processing time, we think we should only have to give a child one directive. And if we have to give them a redirect, then, the child's just not listening and, oh my gosh, I can't deal with this. But, in all reality, children are not all the same. What one child may use as, I need to go clean my room right now, please go clean your room. They may go and clean their room. Whereas a child who has ADHD or a mood disorder or a mental health condition, It may take them 6 or 7 times for you to tell them to go clean their room, because that cognitive processing and really hearing what you're saying and comprehending it in a way that just gives them enough time to process it, that may take 6 or 7 times for that child to go clean their room. And if you lose your shit with them, you're going to have an explosion. So really taking care of your own mental health and kind of feeling out, is this worth picking an argument over? Is it worth, hey, my child dropped a piece of candy on the floor. Instead of saying, you get over here and pick that up right now, you could say, hey, I bet you can't pick up that piece of candy. That challenges them to do the task without you actually saying to do it. Another thing I've already discussed is timers and visual aids. Setting timers for activities such as homework or playtime, giving those breaks in between, giving them time to re-energize themselves and calm down and emotionally regulate themselves, using visual aids such as charts or lists or things to help the child stay on track. The 5 C's of ADHD parenting are self-control, compassion, collaboration, consistency, and celebration. And this approach really helps parents and children to build those skills and navigate ADHD together. And I also think this can be used with other mental health conditions or other diagnoses as well. Self-control. So this is how to use the 5 C's. Learn to manage your own feelings so that you can teach your child to do the same. We are the role models and we set those standards for children. What we are doing, our child is watching us. So if we are criticizing ourselves or losing that control, guess what? Your child is going to criticize themselves. Your child is going to lose that control. If we are fighting with our spouse and calling them an asshole, guess what? Your child's probably going to go to school and say the word asshole. This is where you have to give yourself compassion. Give your child compassion. Meet your child and yourself where they are and where you are, and show that concern, show that support, and really recognize what you need in that moment. Collaboration. Work together with your child and other professionals to find solutions, whether that's taking them to a specialty clinic, whether it's taking them to a hospital or healthcare setting, or even a holistic practitioner. Really try to find what works for you. Consistency, and I preach consistency constantly. Do what you say and say what you'll do. And really respond similarly to recurring behaviors. If you respond one time with letting them get away with it, that expectation is gone. And it's hard. Don't criticize yourself. If you give in to behavior at times, it's normal. I've done that. I have given extra screen time because I'm just tired and I just want to sit for a second. The last thing is celebration. Acknowledge what's working and offer praise and validation. This goes back to really rewarding those positive behaviors and really praising the good things. The benefits of using the 5 C's: reduces stress, it reduces emotional reactivity, it improves cooperation and communication, and it increases the child's self-esteem and satisfaction in relationships with you. It builds that resilience and really fosters that nurturing environment for your child to be successful, because it's going to take time. Your child is not going to get it right away. You can't just go to one therapy session and have all your problems figured out. You can't just go to a doctor and have all your problems figured out. Let's talk about reframing a situation. Have you heard of this technique? And if you have, that's okay. But if you haven't, this is a technique that involves that looking at a problem from a different perspective in order to find a new solution. So this is a tool that can commonly be used in therapy, specifically cognitive behavioral therapy, but we're not going to talk about that. How to reframe a situation in everyday life. So I use this a lot, and I try really hard to use this to change my mindset, my emotions, help me kind of just take a step back and look at things from a new perspective. Okay, how to reframe a situation. Notice a discouraging thought, whether it's a negative thought or a frustration or something that just kind of feels discouraging. Question that thought without judgment and ask if that thought is helpful or true. And if it is not, replace that unhelpful thought or negative thought with a more helpful or a more positive one. Instead of saying, I never do anything right, say, hey, I make mistakes sometimes, but I also have a lot of success. Reframing can help you, like I said, change your mindset and your emotions help you kind of take that step back. And this allows you to tackle those challenges with new perspectives and improve your mental health overall. This can really help you manage stress or manage that fight or flight where you feel like you have to respond to a situation right away. Some tips for reframing a situation is practicing that reframing on paper. Practice saying it to yourself in the mirror. Gradually internalize that process and just breathe. Do some deep breathing to keep your cool and use positive self-talk to keep those things into perspective. Practice compassion and just find the good. Find the happy, find the positive, and find that silver lining for yourself, and just really give yourself that grace and really give yourself some praise. You know, being a parent is hard enough. And I think a lot, especially in our society in 2025, and I think ever since COVID, I don't know if you guys can relate, but ever since COVID, my anxiety has been so heightened. And I just feel so worried constantly about situations that my children are in, or when they're not in my line of sight, I get nervous. You know, anxiety is a common mental health condition that can really affect parents, and that impacts our ability to cope with challenges. And really looking at the joys of raising children or finding that positivity, understanding those symptoms and the effects of anxiety in our parenting is really crucial for managing it effectively. But here's some symptoms of parental anxiety that I have and I really struggle with. This is something I'm still working on, and I can openly admit that. Excessive worry about my child's safety, health, or development. If my children are not in contact with me, whether that's being at a grandparent's house or whether I have that gut feeling in my stomach thinking that something's wrong, I panic and I can't sleep, I can't eat, I just get really nervous. And I think a lot of that comes from previous trauma and what my children have been through in their personal lives. But the next one is making mistakes, that fear of making those mistakes and feeling like you're failing as a parent. We all make mistakes as a parent, but it's just critical to try to look at the good in you, try to look at those strengths that you have as a parent and remind yourself of that every day. Difficulty sleeping due to worry. I feel like this is every mother in the world. We love our children. We want to keep our children safe. Sometimes when they're struggling and we don't know how to help them, sometimes we don't sleep. Irritability and impatience with children. This is so easy to fall into that habit. When we are worried or when we are anxious, we can kind of be snappy, right? We can be irritated with our spouse or snap at our children and just lose our shit sometimes, to be completely honest. We can have that overprotectiveness and those controlling behaviors where we want it done our way so that we know that our children are going to be safe, or we know that it's being done in a way that makes us feel safe, so we feel that we have to have that control. Probably the most common, I would say, is avoidance of certain situations or activities due to anxiety. As a parent, not even necessarily with your child, but just in general with anxiety, it's easy to avoid those situations that make us feel uncomfortable. What can we do to help our anxiety? And what are the effects of parental anxiety on children? Well, effects of parental anxiety on children are increased risk of children developing anxiety disorders, difficulty with emotional regulation in children, again, goes back to adults setting the example and setting the tone for what should be expected. Overprotective or controlling parenting styles in our children when they become adults. Reduced opportunities for children to develop those coping skills, develop that social interaction with other children. If we don't want to go somewhere, then how are our children supposed to interact socially with other children? So how do we manage that? We can seek therapy. That's always a given. Joining support groups and connecting with other parents who do understand those challenges of parenting and can provide that support and validation for us to feel normalized, I guess. Practice self-care, you guys. This is my favorite one. Engage in those activities that reduce stress and make you feel happy, make you feel good, promote that well-being, such as exercise, meditation, sunshine. spending time with loved ones, doing something that makes you feel that joy and just feel that relaxation. The next one is educating yourself and learning about child development, parenting strategies, and building that confidence to reduce that worry. I don't think any mother or any parent in general is ever going to stop worrying, because it does mean that we love our children. But just being able to talk openly about that with our partner, and if we don't have a partner because we're a single mom, or we just don't feel comfortable, talk to somebody that you trust. It doesn't have to be someone that you're with. Set those realistic expectations and accept that it's normal to experience this anxiety as a parent. Focus on doing your best. Focus on the little wins and celebrate those as they come along. And just really focus that it's okay to strive for the good, but don't be striving for perfection. Don't be striving for an unrealistic expectation. And really try to encourage your child to be independent, making those age-appropriate decisions and facing those challenges, letting them work it out on their own before you just jump in and take control. Because in reality, our children are going to have to be adults one day. And we need to try to provide them with tools in their toolbox to do that and to be a successful adult one day. And it's our job to really give them that independence and model that healthy lifestyle for them so that they know how to deal with stress and emotions when they are an adult. But what about coping with depression as a parent? How does depression affect parents? And while everyone can feel really sad or overwhelmed on occasion, especially parents, depression is more than just that passing mood. It's that feeling that kind of lingers and not being so short term. It's normal for us to feel sad or overwhelmed or frustrated on occasion, feeling lonely, but it's when it lingers. Parenting's a full-time job. And when we have our own jobs and our own lives on top of parenting, that can feel really overwhelming. It can feel really lonely. And there is more than one type of depressive disorder, but the most common symptom of that really is depressed mood, those feelings of hopelessness, sadness, helplessness, and loneliness, as well as that inability to find the pleasure in everyday life. While the symptoms of depression experienced vary for everyone, they can really lead to those challenges in everyday life and functioning when they're severe enough. And these may cause problems and issues and impacts with our parenting journeys. Parental depression can really result in those disrupted bonds with children. And that physical and emotional energy that we feel as parents can be drained out of us. When a parent's unable to emotionally be present with their child, the development of that healthy child bond becomes interrupted. During a bout of depression, when parents are unable to kind of tend to those needs of their own, they typically lack the energy to attend to such basic tasks of hygiene, leaving their bed, leaving the couch. And that bond between the parent and child is a product of that prolonged interaction and engagement. So when a parent feels absent or is absent from caregiving their child, that development of that bond with the child is impaired. And that disruption doesn't have to necessarily be permanent, but it still really becomes a problem when we don't know how to find that coping and find that treatment for ourselves. So that's where we try to find coping skills. And when dealing with depression, parents sometimes are not able to show up in the life that they may want to or thought that they were going to. And so it becomes really hard to cope and manage those everyday stressors of that parenthood presents for us, right? Depression compromises our ability to focus, our ability to concentrate and think logically. So depressed parents may turn to those maladaptive behaviors or coping skills to deal with that depression. This really leads me to my next topic about parental guilt. Parents take great ownership in their children's development. And while this may lead to that sense of self-congratulation when a child's thriving, it can also lead to that overwhelming sense of guilt or feeling of failure when their child stumbles. Parental depression really deepens that negative side, and the depressed parents can be smothered by the guilt or failure that they feel for not being present or involved in their child's life as they feel like they should be. And that can increase that parental burnout. Being responsible for the well-being of another human is so incredibly tough, and that's such a big responsibility to have. So parents who are otherwise healthy may feel overwhelmed by those obligations of parenthood. In fact, that caregiver burnout, that parental burnout, and even mom burnout, I feel like is very common, but those are frequently addressed challenges. Parental burnout is that pervasive sense of exhaustion from caregiving and feeling really disconnected with your child, and that doubting ourselves in the ability to effectively parent. And so that kind of overlaps with the symptoms of depression, that lack of energy, self-worth, or pleasure in finding the joy in everyday life things. And addressing these symptoms of depression can also address and minimize those parental burnout feelings and those parental burnout symptoms. So how do we deal with that? How do we fix that? Some tips for parenting when you have depression. The first thing for you really to do is maintain that self-care. And this really has helped me when I've felt depressed, because there was a time when I had a really hard time getting out of bed. So keep that daily routine. If you have to set a timer, or if you have to set a reminder in your phone, or create a schedule to take care of yourself. So, 8 a.m. every day, I'm going to take a shower, or I'm going to shower before bed, or do some yoga, or do some self-care, skin routine, or something to take care of you and battle that depression by forcing yourself to wake up and engage with other people. And by doing this, we are actually caring for ourselves in important ways and increasing finding that joy. The benefits of self-care really include decreasing those symptoms of depression and also enhancing our self-esteem, because our self-esteem is not always very high when we have those depression bouts, right? And self-care is not just about bubble baths or massages. It can include that emotional self-care, such as journaling, taking a walk, going to a yoga class, or meditating at home. And that is designed to lessen those feelings of depression. Really try to practice that self-compassion. Be kind to yourself and recognize that those feelings that you feel and are experiencing are symptoms of a disorder. And show yourself love, show yourself grace, and minimize those feelings of worthlessness by doing something for yourself, even if it's something small. Remind yourself that you are suffering from a condition and that you can actually put yourself and your support network in a position to help fight that. And that kind of goes back to having those supports in place, finding your people, finding your tribe that support you and that you feel comfortable talking to. Mental disorders are a lot like physical disorders. We don't normalize that enough. And eating things like a healthy diet and looking at that nutritional psychiatry, which explores that link between mental health and diet and nutrition, suggests that what we eat plays a significant role in how we feel. So healthy eating, finding things that fuel your body and give you that energy, fresh fruits and vegetables, high protein, and drinking that water. We often will look towards alcohol or pop or something unhealthy when we are in a bout of depression. So pick up a glass of water, put some lemon and ginger in it, add some lime or some cucumber, make it fun, and really encourage yourself to practice that. Another thing is exercising. Getting regular exercise, even if you have to force yourself to do it, can lessen that depressive feeling. And exercising has many benefits, and it can spur that production of endorphins that we feel, and it can promote nerve growth, which generates how neural connections become new. And exercise can also grow and expand that hippocampus, which is the part of the brain that regulates motivation and emotions. So that all goes back to that emotional regulation, guys. And whether it's taking a 10-minute walk or getting some dumbbells and just lifting in the basement for 5 minutes or 10 minutes to start off, and then building up to that, build that momentum up to, then be able to take an hour for yourself and exercise, get sunshine, get out and go for a run, find that nature trail that you like, do something that makes you feel good. Another thing is doing something good for someone else. Giving a person a reason to feel grateful can actually positively impact your mental health and boost your mood. When you volunteer to engage in just help in the community, or when you interact with somebody that you normally wouldn't interact with, you can boost your own dopamine levels. And this helps combat that feeling of depression. It just all really comes down to finding what works for you and finding that motivation to get up and move your body and get up and just take care of yourself. So I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. I hope it was helpful in some way to normalize and be relatable to other moms who feel these feelings, and just really know that you're not alone. Find that person that you can relate to, find that person that you can trust and talk to, and just do something to take care of your mental health and your physical health, your emotional health, and your spiritual health even. Do something to care for yourself and give yourself some grace, because you are a mom, you are a parent, you are doing your best, and we are all struggling, even if we don't show it. See you next week.